You know, in our super connected world, we're navigating different cultures pretty much every single day. But how do we actually make sense of it all? Today, we're going to dig into two really powerful ideas that help explain our shared reality. Multiculturalism, that's the big picture view of our diverse societies, and biculturalism, which is the deeply personal journey of living between worlds. Okay, let's get into it.
First things first, let's start with a classic question, right? When different cultures come together, what's the best way for that to happen? Should everybody just kind of blend into one single new culture, like ingredients melting together in a pot? Or should each culture keep its own unique flavor while still being part of the whole, like all the different ingredients in a salad bowl? This simple metaphor, it really gets to the very heart of the challenges we're about to unpack.
All right, so let's begin with that wider societal view and talk about what it actually means to live in our multicultural world. Now, the term multiculturalism gets thrown around a lot, but it really has two key meanings. First, it's just a fact, right? It's a way to describe a society that has lots of different cultural groups. But second, and this is maybe the more important part, it's an attitude. It's this idea that promotes tolerance and argues that all groups deserve to participate equally in society. So it's not just about diversity being there, it's about how a society chooses to embrace it.
And you can see exactly what this looks like in the real world right here. A sign like this at a local market, it's so much more than just practical information. It's a visible statement that multiple languages, and by extension, multiple cultures, are welcome. They're a core part of the community's fabric. This is basically multiculturalism in action. But as you can probably imagine, bringing diverse groups of people together isn't always a totally smooth process. In fact, it creates a pretty fundamental dilemma for any society.
And this slide really lays out that core tension perfectly. On one side, you've got the host nationals, or the majority group. They might start to worry about their mainstream values being challenged, or about new competition for jobs, or even about shifts in the power structure they're used to. Then on the other side, you have migrant groups, and they, understandably, want to hold on to their cultural heritage. They want to pass on their language, and they want to form their own supportive communities. Both sides have goals that are totally legitimate, but they often compete with each other.
So that's the big societal push and pull. But these huge forces are felt on a really personal level. What does it actually feel like for a person who's living at the intersection of these cultures every single day?
And this brings us right to the individual's experience. We're shifting our focus now from the big picture of multiculturalism to the fascinating personal idea of biculturalism.
Psychologists actually have a name for this internal experience: Bicultural Identity Integration, or BII for short. You can kind of think of it as a spectrum. On one end, you have people who feel their two cultures are totally harmonious, they complement each other, they make each other richer. But on the other end, you have people who feel their two identities are just in a constant state of conflict, always pulling them in opposite directions.
To make this a little more concrete, let's look at the example of Maori society in New Zealand. Historically, a person's identity wasn't defined by their individual accomplishments, but by their relationships and their duties to their extended family, their subtribe, and their tribe. It was a deeply collective way of being. Now imagine a person from that background trying to navigate a highly individualistic Western culture. You can immediately see how their BI, that internal sense of whether these two very different worldviews can even coexist, is absolutely central to their entire experience.
So, how does someone with two different cultural toolkits navigate their world from one moment to the next? Well, it involves this process that's kind of like a constant, invisible border crossing that's happening right inside their mind. This process is called cultural frame switching, and it basically happens in 3 steps. First up, there's a social cue. This could be anything: hearing your native language, seeing a flag, even smelling a familiar food from your childhood. Step 2, the mental shift. That cue activates the corresponding cultural mindset, almost like flipping a switch to a different way of seeing the world. And finally, step 3 is the behavioral response. The person then thinks, feels, and acts in a way that lines up with that activated cultural frame.
And here's the really crucial point: that switching process isn't the same for everybody. A person's level of bicultural identity integration dramatically affects how it works. If you see your cultures as compatible, we'd call that high BII. A cue from one culture might make you lean into that identity really smoothly. But if you see them as being in conflict, low BII, that same cue might actually cause you to react against it, almost like a subconscious pushback. It's just a fascinating look at how our internal harmony or conflict plays out in our real-world behavior.
So when you take all this in, from the huge societal level all the way down to the individual mind, what does this all mean for the future of who we are?
You know, if there's one key thing to take away from all of this, it's that successful integration is absolutely a two-way street. It is not just the responsibility of immigrants to change and to fit in. The host society also has to be willing to adjust, to accept, and ultimately to be transformed by the presence of new cultures.
So what does that two-way street actually look like in practice? Well, it's about moving beyond just simple tolerance to genuine understanding. It means the host culture has to feel secure enough to let other cultures thrive, while at the same time, immigrants are actively participating in the broader society. And ultimately, it really requires everyone to communicate and learn from each other to reduce that natural anxiety that just comes with navigating our differences.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over. We've seen how societies grapple with diversity and how individuals have to navigate multiple cultural worlds inside themselves. So as globalization keeps making our world smaller and smaller, are we moving toward a future where having just one single, static identity becomes the exception rather than the rule? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.